My ex-wife, who happens to be the bank manager, publicly embarrassed me just because I asked to withdraw $250. She smirked and said, "We don't serve beggars here." A few minutes later, I made a request for $4.20 billion, and the whole bank came to a standstill. My name's Julian Hart, and if you looked at me right now, sitting in my worn-out armchair with a mug of gas station coffee and yesterday's sweatpants, you'd probably think I peaked somewhere around community college. And honestly, that's exactly what my ex-wife thought too. Still thinks, actually. Clarissa's got this whole narrative built up in her head where I'm the sad epilogue to her success story, the before picture in her glow-up journey, the cautionary tale she tells at wine nights about settling too early. I'm 43 years old, and according to her, I'm a professional nobody, a title she's been more than happy to broadcast to anyone within earshot for the past 3 years since our divorce became final. Let me paint you a picture of Clarissa Montgomery Hart, or as she calls herself now, Clarissa Montgomery, because apparently my last name was holding her back from her destiny, or whatever. She's a bank manager these days. Not just any bank manager. She'll correct you real quick on that. But the branch manager of Summit Trust Bank's downtown location, which she mentions approximately 47 times per conversation. Smart woman, I'll give her that. Ambitious as hell, climbed that corporate ladder like it owed her money, and she's got this whole boss babe aesthetic down to a science. Blazers that could cut glass, heels that echo through hallways like a countdown to someone's performance review, and this smile that's 60% crest white strips and 40%, "I'm better than you, and we both know it." The woman's allergic to humility the way some people are allergic to gluten. She breaks out in hives if she goes more than 10 minutes without reminding someone of her accomplishments. Me? I'm the quiet one. The boring one. The guy who apparently peaked when I fixed her parents' Wi-Fi router 5 years ago during Thanksgiving dinner, which, by the way, her dad still brings up like I performed open-heart surgery. Remember when Julian fixed the internet? That was something. Yeah, Dad, riveting stuff. Give me a medal. I spent 6 years married to this woman. 6 years of trying to be enough for someone who treated contentment like a character flaw. We had a decent life, or so I thought. A little house in the suburbs, a decent couch, a coffee maker that worked most of the time, and each other. But somewhere along the way, Clarissa decided that decent was just another word for dead inside. And ambition became sexier than loyalty, success more attractive than stability, and basically anything became better than being married to a guy who wore Costco jeans and didn't feel the need to post his entire life on Instagram. Enter Tanner. Tanner fucking Westbrook. Yeah, that's his actual middle name. I checked. Okay, I didn't check, but it should be, because this guy is the human embodiment of every finance bro cliche you've ever rolled your eyes at. He's a stockbroker, and I use that term loosely because his main talent seems to be losing other people's money while somehow maintaining the confidence of a man who's never been wrong about anything in his entire life. The dude talks about crypto like it's his religion, drops terms like disruption and synergy into casual conversation, and wears those unnecessarily tight suits that make him look like a Ken doll someone left too close to a radiator. Clarissa met him at some banking conference. One of those networking events where people drink cheap Chardonnay and pretend to be interested in each other's quarterly projections. And apparently, his pitch about blockchain technology and his Porsche lease was just too irresistible. The divorce was loud, like really loud. Not Jerry Springer loud, but definitely loud enough that our neighbors knew the exact timeline of our relationship's collapse and probably took notes. Clarissa made sure everyone knew she was leaving me for someone more driven, someone who understood her ambitions, someone who wasn't content with mediocrity. Her words, not mine, though she said them to my face during our last argument, which took place in a Cheesecake Factory parking lot, because apparently that's where modern love goes to die. The love was dead, had been for a while, honestly, but we kept up appearances for way too long, doing that thing couples do where they're basically roommates who occasionally argue about whose turn it is to buy toilet paper. By the end, the only thing we still shared was her constant, burning need to prove to everyone, especially me, that she was so much better off without me, that leaving was the best decision she ever made, that her life was basically a champagne commercial now, while mine was presumably a sad country song. Spoiler alert, she wasn't better off. I mean, She got the Instagram-worthy life she wanted, the fancy job title, the boyfriend with the least luxury car, the brunch photos with her equally insufferable friends. But better off? Nah. I could tell from her eyes during our last few court-mandated interactions. There's a difference between happy and busy, between fulfilled and just filling time. But hey, that wasn't my problem anymore. After the dust settled and the lawyers finally stopped calling, I rebuilt my life quietly. No flashy cars that scream, I'm compensating for something. No Instagram lifestyle where I document my breakfast like it's breaking news. No desperate attempts to prove anything to anyone. Just peace, coffee, lots of coffee, the good stuff I learned to brew myself because Starbucks prices are basically robbery, and coding. I dove back into what I loved before Clarissa convinced me that hobbies were fine, but they didn't pay for the kind of life she wanted. I spent my nights in front of my laptop, lines of code scrolling past like digital poetry, building things, fixing things, creating systems and algorithms that made sense in a way human relationships never seemed to. It was quiet. It was mine. It was exactly what I needed. But here's the thing about fate, and I mean this with all sincerity. Fate has a twisted, almost sadistic sense of humor. Like, if fate were a person, it would be that friend who sets you up on blind dates that go horrifically wrong, just so they have a good story to tell later. Because the universe, in its infinite comedy, decided that the same woman who mocked my boring life, who told our mutual friends that I'd never amount to anything, who literally used the phrase, "he has no ambition," in our divorce mediation like it was a clinical diagnosis, would end up working for a bank that technically, legally, and ironically worked for me. Yeah, you read that right. Clarissa Montgomery, branch manager extraordinaire, boss babe supreme. The woman who couldn't stop telling people about her important job and her impressive title and her corner office with the view of the parking garage, was about to find out that in the grand corporate structure of the financial world, she was basically my employee. She just didn't know it yet. Nobody did. And that's exactly how I wanted it, at least for now, because the reveal, the moment when her perfectly constructed reality came crashing down like a Jenga tower made of ego and expensive blazers, that was going to be sweeter than any revenge I could have plotted, mainly because I didn't even have to plot it. The universe did all the heavy lifting. I just had to show up and withdraw some money. Well, a lot of money. Like, enough money to make regional directors sweat through their suits kind of money. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I had to deal with Mrs. Keller's heating bill, walk into that bank like any regular customer, and watch Clarissa's face when she realized that the nobody she divorced was about to become her biggest problem. The boring guy in the Costco jeans was about to make her very interesting week very, very interesting. And honestly, I couldn't wait. Look, I've seen some messy divorces in my time. Friends, colleagues. That one guy at the gym who wouldn't shut up about his custody battle, but mine with Clarissa? That thing had more drama than a full season of one of those telenovelas my abuela used to watch, except with less passionate declarations and more passive-aggressive text messages sent at 2 in the morning. We're talking about a relationship collapse so spectacular that I'm pretty sure our lawyers are still dining out on the stories. But here's the kicker. The real entertainment wasn't even the divorce itself. It was watching Clarissa's family react to it, like I was some kind of tumor they'd finally managed to remove, and now they could all breathe easier and get back to their regularly scheduled programming of being moderately wealthy and extremely judgmental. The Montgomery family treated me like I was the house cat for the entire 6 years I was married into their little dynasty. You know the type. They'd feed me occasionally, usually at mandatory holiday gatherings where attendance was tracked like a corporate HR department, pat me on the head when I did something they deemed useful, and then completely ignore my existence the rest of the time unless they needed their computer fixed or their smart TV set up, because God forbid any of them read an instruction manual. I was furniture that occasionally spoke, a decorative husband who was acceptable enough to have around, but not quite impressive enough to brag about at the country club. Oh, Julian? Yes, he's very nice. He has kind eyes. That's what Clarissa's mother Diana used to say about me, which is family speak for he's broke, but at least he's polite and doesn't steal the silverware. Diana Montgomery is one of those women who perfected the art of the compliment-insult hybrid, where everything she says sounds nice on the surface, but leaves you feeling vaguely inadequate for the next 3 to 5 business days. Julian, you look so comfortable in those jeans. Translation: Why don't you own adult pants? It's so refreshing that you don't care about material things. Translation, we noticed you drive a Honda. You're so down to earth. Translation, we expected more from our daughter. She'd smile with all her teeth, the kind of smile that politicians practice in mirrors, and touch my arm like we were co-conspirators in some scheme. Except the scheme was just her tolerating my presence at family functions while quietly hoping Clarissa would wake up one day and upgrade to someone with a hyphenated last name and a trust fund. Her father, Richard, was somehow worse because at least Diana was upfront about her disappointment. Richard had this way of looking through me, like I was made of glass, or more accurately, like I was made of something so inconsequential that his eyes just naturally skipped over me to find something more interesting to focus on, like the wallpaper or his phone or literally anything else. During family dinners, he'd ask me about work with the enthusiasm of someone asking about dental procedures. Still doing the computer thing, Julian? Yeah, Richard, still doing the computer thing, still making those ones and zeros dance, still living that thrilling IT life that you can barely pretend to understand. He'd nod, say something like, good, good, and then immediately pivot to talking about golf or the stock market or whatever rich guys discuss when they're not busy ignoring their sons-in-law. And Clarissa's sister Tiffany? She was actually decent to me, which in that family made her practically a saint. She'd at least make eye contact and ask genuine questions, though I always suspected she felt bad for me the way you feel bad for a rescue dog that's not quite cute enough to get adopted quickly. How are you holding up, Julian? She'd whisper at family events, like I was surviving some kind of hostage situation, which, looking back, wasn't entirely inaccurate. So when the divorce finally happened, when Clarissa packed her bags and moved in with Tanner and his aggressively modern downtown loft that probably cost more per month than I made in 6, the Montgomery family didn't just accept it, they celebrated. I'm talking about a mini party, and I'm not even exaggerating. I heard through the grapevine, specifically through Tiffany, who still texted me occasionally because she's a decent human being, that Diana literally opened champagne. Champagne. Like their daughter leaving her marriage was some kind of achievement to commemorate, like she'd graduated from the school of matrimonial mistakes and was finally moving on to bigger and better things. They toasted to Clarissa's fresh start and new beginnings, and probably made some passive-aggressive comment about how she was finally free to reach her full potential. As if I'd been holding her hostage in our moderately priced suburban home with my reasonable career and stable income. Meanwhile, while they were popping bottles and congratulating themselves on being rid of me, while Clarissa was updating her LinkedIn with her new promotion to branch manager at Summit Trust Bank and making sure every single person in her network knew about it with a post that was basically a humble brag dissertation, I was quietly building something they couldn't even begin to comprehend. See, while they were measuring success in job titles and luxury car leases and social media engagement, I was operating on a completely different level, playing a game they didn't even know existed. I took my heartbreak, my anger, my wounded pride, and all those nights I couldn't sleep because my brain wouldn't shut up about everything that went wrong, and I channeled it into something productive, something massive, something that would make Clarissa's impressive bank manager position look like a lemonade stand in comparison. I didn't need revenge, not in the traditional sense. I didn't need to slash tires or send anonymous emails or do any of that petty nonsense that people do when they're hurt. What I needed was patience. I needed time to build, to code, to create, to transform my skills into something so substantial that when the moment came, and I knew it would come because the universe loves irony, the reveal would be devastating without me having to do anything except exist. Revenge wasn't the goal. It was just a bonus feature, like when you buy a car and it comes with heated seats you didn't know you needed but now can't live without. I spent months, then years, working in silence. No announcements, no updates, no LinkedIn posts about my journey or my growth or any of that performative nonsense that people do when they need external validation for their accomplishments. I just worked. My apartment was modest, my car was practical, my clothes came from places where you could return things without a receipt, and to anyone looking at me from the outside, I was exactly what Clarissa said I was, a guy who was going nowhere, doing nothing, living small. Her family probably thought I was depressed, that I was struggling, that the divorce had broken me, and I was just limping through life trying to figure out how to move on from losing their precious daughter. They had no idea. None of them did. Not Clarissa with her corner office and her motivational posters. Not Diana with her barely concealed relief that I was out of the family. Not Richard with his complete indifference to my existence. Not even Tiffany with her sympathetic texts. They couldn't see what I was building because they were too busy looking down at me to notice that I was constructing something above their heads, something so far beyond their understanding that when it finally came crashing down on them, they wouldn't even see it coming. And Summit Trust Bank, Clarissa's beloved workplace, the institution she was so proud to represent, the place where she felt important and powerful and successful, that bank, through a series of corporate structures and holding companies and financial relationships that most people don't bother to understand, was connected to my world in a way that was about to become very, very relevant. The irony was almost too perfect, like the universe had written a joke specifically for me and was just waiting for the right moment to deliver the punchline. I didn't need to seek revenge. I just needed to be patient enough to let it find me. And oh boy, was it about to find me in the most spectacular way possible, gift-wrapped with a bow made of Clarissa's own arrogance and delivered right to her perfectly organized desk with the nameplate that probably cost more than it should have. It was a Thursday morning, one of those cold ones where the air bites at your face the second you step outside and makes you question why humans ever decided to live anywhere that wasn't tropical. I was in my apartment, minding my own business, probably 3 cups of coffee deep and watching some documentary about deep-sea creatures because that's the kind of riveting content you consume when you're single and it's 9 a.m. on a weekday. Then my phone rang with that particular tone I'd set for my neighbor, Mrs. Keller, and I knew immediately that something was wrong because Mrs. Keller only called for 2 reasons. She'd baked something and wanted to share it, or something had gone catastrophically wrong in her life, and she needed help. This was definitely the second thing. I could hear it in her voice before she even said hello, that watery, shaky quality that meant she'd been crying or was about to start. Mrs. Keller is 74 years old, lives alone in the apartment next to mine, makes a killer apple pie, and is basically the human embodiment of everything good about the generation that still writes thank you cards and remembers your birthday without Facebook reminding them. She's also on a fixed income, which is a polite way of saying the government sends her a check every month that barely covers her expenses, and any unexpected cost is basically a financial earthquake. "Julian, honey, I'm so sorry to bother you," she started, and I could already tell this was going to wreck my day emotionally because Mrs. Keller apologizes for existing, which drives me crazy. It's the heating bill. It's doubled this month, something about rate increases and cold weather adjustments, and my pension check, it hasn't arrived yet. They say it's delayed, maybe another week, and I need $250 to cover the difference or they're going to shut off my heat. And Julian, I can't be without heat. Not in this weather, I'll freeze. She was crying by the end of it, and I was already grabbing my jacket because there was exactly 0 chance I was letting this woman freeze in her apartment while I had money in the bank. "Mrs. Keller, don't worry about it. I got you. I'm heading to the bank right now. I'll have the money to you within the hour, okay? Don't cry, we're going to fix this." She tried to protest, tried to tell me she'd pay me back, that she didn't want to be a burden, all that stuff that good people say when they're in crisis and feel guilty about needing help. I told her to stop it, that she'd made me approximately 40 pies over the years, and this was just settling the debt, which made her laugh a little through the tears. So I threw on my jacket, my regular, normal person jacket that I'd bought on sale at Target, not some designer thing with a label that costs more than rent, and headed out into the cold. I didn't even think about which bank I was going to. I just walked to the closest one, which happened to be Summit Trust Bank's downtown branch, because the universe has a sense of humor that borders on sadistic and apparently wasn't done with me yet. I walked in through those big glass doors, the kind that make you feel like you're entering a spaceship or a really boring museum, and headed straight for the counter. That's when I heard it. That voice. The one I'd heard in my head for 3 years telling me I wasn't good enough, wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't enough, period. Except now it was real, and it was coming from behind me, dripping with that particular brand of sweetness that's actually pure vinegar disguised as sugar. Well, Julian Hart, didn't think I'd see you here. I turned around, and there she was. Clarissa, my ex-wife, standing in her perfectly tailored blazer that probably cost what I used to spend on groceries for a month, her hair done up in that professional style that says, "I'm important and I know it," holding a tablet like it was a scepter and she was the queen of banking. She had that grin on her face, that same grin I'd seen 1,000 times during our marriage whenever she felt like she'd won an argument or proven a point, the kind of smile that could curdle milk and make babies cry. I hadn't noticed the nameplate when I walked in. I hadn't noticed that Summit Trust was her bank, that this was her branch, that I just walked into enemy territory wearing sweatpants and yesterday's determination. But she'd noticed me immediately, probably spotted me the second I walked through the door like a predator noticing wounded prey wandering into her territory. "What brings you here?" she asked, and I could see her eyes scanning me up and down, taking inventory of my outfit, my posture, my entire existence, probably calculating my net worth based on my shoe quality. "Looking for a loan? I have to tell you, Julian, your credit score probably isn't what it used to be. Divorce is hard on the finances, isn't it?" She said this loud enough that the people around us could hear, because humiliating me privately wasn't enough. She needed an audience. I took a breath, reminded myself that I was here for Mrs. Keller, not for whatever psychological warfare Clarissa was trying to initiate. "I just need to withdraw $250, I said, keeping my voice level, professional, boring. Just a regular guy doing a regular banking transaction on a regular Thursday morning. The laugh that came out of her mouth could have shattered windows. It echoed across the lobby like a siren, making heads turn, making people stop their conversations mid-sentence to see what was so funny. $250? She repeated, like I'd just asked her to explain quantum physics or requested a small loan of $1 million. "You came all the way down here, to my bank, to withdraw $250? She was loving this. I could see it in her eyes, that gleeful spark that came from feeling superior, from having power over someone who used to be her equal. Then she said it, the line that would change everything, the sentence that would come back to haunt her in approximately 24 hours. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to that condescending tone that managers use when they're about to crush someone's spirit, and said, $250? Julian, we don't serve beggars here. The whole room went silent. Like, you could have heard a pin drop, a mouse sneeze, a single dust particle hitting the floor. It was that kind of silence that makes your ears ring because the absence of sound is somehow louder than noise. The guy at the counter holding a coffee cup literally stopped mid-sip, his cup frozen halfway to his mouth, like someone had pressed pause on his life. A woman filling out a deposit slip looked up with her eyes wide, her mouth forming a little O of shock. Even the printer in the corner seemed to pause awkwardly, like it was embarrassed on behalf of everyone present. I just stood there, looking at her, watching her bask in her moment of perceived victory. She thought she'd destroyed me. She thought this was her mic drop moment, her grand declaration that she was better than me, that she'd won the divorce, that leaving me was the best decision she'd ever made. She was practically glowing with satisfaction, probably already composing the story she'd tell her friends later about how she'd run into her loser ex-husband and put him in his place. But here's the thing about moments like these. They're only satisfying if you're right. If you actually know what you're talking about. If the person you're humiliating is actually who you think they are. Clarissa had no idea who I was anymore. She was operating on 3-year-old information, making assumptions based on outdated data, thinking she was playing checkers when I'd been playing chess this entire time. I smiled. Not a big smile, not a dramatic one, just a small, calm smile that probably looked polite to everyone watching but meant so much more. "You're right, Clarissa," I said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. "You don't serve beggars here, but you're about to find out who you do serve." She blinked, confused, that confident grin faltering just slightly. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. I just turned around, walked back through those glass doors into the cold morning air, and headed home. Mrs. Keller would get her money. I'd find another bank, another way. But Clarissa? Clarissa had just made the biggest mistake of her professional career, and she didn't even know it yet. She'd humiliated the wrong person, on the wrong day, in front of the wrong witnesses. Tomorrow was going to be very, very interesting. And I was going to need more coffee. I got back to my apartment, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to the kitchen to make coffee. Not the cheap instant stuff you grab when you're running late, but the real deal, the kind where you grind the beans yourself and the smell fills your entire apartment like an aromatic therapy session. This was the drink of calm billionaires. Or at least that's what I told myself as I watched the dark liquid drip into my mug with the chipped handle that I refused to replace because it still worked perfectly fine. Some people meditate. Some people do yoga. Some people punch walls. Me? I make coffee and let the ritual of it smooth out the sharp edges of whatever nonsense the day has thrown at me. And today had thrown some grade A nonsense at me in the form of my ex-wife's smug face and that line about not serving beggars. I should have been angry. Maybe a normal person would have been angry. But instead, I felt something else, anticipation. That tingly feeling you get right before something monumentally entertaining is about to happen. Like when you're watching a horror movie and you can see the character walking toward the obvious danger and you're just sitting there with your popcorn thinking, "Oh buddy, you have no idea what's coming." I sat down at my desk, the same desk I bought off Craigslist 5 years ago for $40 from a college student who needed beer money, and opened my laptop. The screen flickered to life, displaying my regular desktop, a generic mountain landscape that came pre-installed because I couldn't be bothered to personalize it. But that's not what I was interested in. I opened a specific browser, entered a specific URL that wasn't saved in my bookmarks or history, typed in a password that was approximately 80 characters long, and included symbols that most people don't even know exist on their keyboards, and waited for the screen to change. And there it was. The dark dashboard of Helix Capital Systems, glowing against the black background like something out of a sci-fi movie, displaying numbers that would make most people's eyes cross and their brains short-circuit. My private investment AI, the baby I'd been building and refining and perfecting for the past 3 years, the thing that managed. And I need you to really hear this. Maybe sit down if you're not already sitting. $4.2 billion in global assets. Yeah, that's billion. With a B. As in, boy oh boy is Clarissa going to lose her mind when she finds out. As in, more money than most people will see in 100 lifetimes. As in, the kind of wealth that doesn't just change your life. It changes the lives of everyone around you. And the lives of people you've never met. And probably the lives of people who haven't been born yet, because generational wealth is a real thing, and I was sitting on enough of it to start a dynasty if I wanted to. Which I absolutely did not, because that sounded exhausting. Let me back up and explain how a regular guy, a nobody, according to his ex-wife, ended up controlling enough money to buy a small country or at least a really nice island somewhere tropical. After Clarissa left, after the divorce papers were signed and she drove off into the sunset with Tanner and his leased Porsche, I was a mess. I'm not going to lie about that and pretend I was fine. I was the opposite of fine. I was that special kind of broken that comes from having someone you loved look at you and decide you weren't enough, that your best wasn't good enough, that everything you thought you were building together was actually just you building something by yourself while she waited for something better to come along. So I did what any reasonable person does when they're emotionally destroyed. I threw myself into work. Except my work wasn't a normal 9-to-5 job where you clock in, push papers around, and clock out. My work was coding, building, creating systems that could think faster than humans, predict patterns that most people couldn't see even if you drew them a diagram. I'd always been good with computers, good with algorithms, good with seeing how things connected in ways that weren't obvious. It's why I'd been successful in my previous career, even if Clarissa never seemed impressed by it because I wasn't a doctor or a lawyer or whatever prestigious profession she thought I should have pursued. But after the divorce, I didn't just code. I obsessed. I spent 16-hour days in front of my laptop, surviving on coffee and spite, building an AI that could analyze market movements, predict trends, identify opportunities that human traders would miss because they were too busy having feelings and making emotional decisions. I studied everything: stock markets, cryptocurrency, commodities, real estate, international banking systems, all of it. I read papers written by economists who had more degrees than I had houseplants. I watched the markets move like other people watch sports, seeing patterns in the chaos, finding order in the randomness. And then I built Helix. Named it after the double helix of DNA because this thing was going to evolve, adapt, learn, and become something that could survive in the brutal ecosystem of global finance. I started small, really small. I took my divorce settlement, which wasn't much because we'd agreed to split everything 50-50 and neither of us had much to split, and I put it into the system. Watched it work. Watched it make decisions faster than I could blink. Watched it turn a few $1,000s into 10,000, then 50,000, then 100,000. While Clarissa was posting boss lady selfies on LinkedIn, doing that thing where she'd take a photo of her laptop at a coffee shop with a caption about grinding or hustle culture, or whatever motivational nonsense was trending that week, I was building an empire in silence. She was performing success for an audience. I was actually creating it in a way she couldn't even comprehend. Every time she posted about closing a big deal at the bank, about hitting her quarterly targets, about getting recognition from her regional manager, I was watching my system move millions of dollars across markets so efficiently that it would have made her head spin. The beauty of Helix wasn't just that it made money. Lots of programs can make money if you're lucky or the market's good. The beauty was that it predicted market movements down to the millisecond. It could see a stock was going to jump 30 seconds before it happened. It could identify a cryptocurrency crash minutes before the panic started. It understood patterns in human behavior, in market psychology, in the way fear and greed moved through financial systems like weather patterns. And it was learning constantly, getting smarter with every trade, every transaction, every microsecond of data it processed. Within a year, I'd turned that initial investment into serious money. Not billionaire money yet, but enough that I could have bought a nice house, a fancy car, all the things Clarissa thought I could never afford. But I didn't. I lived in my same apartment, drove my same car, wore my same Target jeans, because the goal wasn't to look rich. The goal was to be so absurdly wealthy that looking rich would have been redundant and frankly kind of tacky. By year 2, I was managing 9 figures. That's hundreds of millions for anyone keeping track at home. And I did it all through a shell company, a maze of legal entities and offshore accounts that were completely legitimate. I had lawyers and accountants making sure of that, but completely anonymous. Nobody knew who owned Helix Capital, not the investors who trusted the system with their money, not the financial institutions that handled the transactions, not even the board members who took orders from an encrypted account named Jay Hale, which was technically me, though they assumed Jay Hale was some mysterious billionaire genius operating out of Silicon Valley or Wall Street, or maybe a private island somewhere. Plot twist: Jay Hale was a guy in sweatpants eating leftover pizza in a rent-controlled apartment, and that guy was me. Now here's where it gets really funny, and I mean laugh until you cry. Universe has a sixth sense of humor funny. As Helix grew, as the portfolio expanded, I needed legitimate financial institutions to handle certain transactions, to hold accounts, to process the ungodly amount of money flowing through the system. So my team. Yes, I had a team by this point, lawyers and accountants and financial advisors who all worked for the mysterious Jay Hale, set up relationships with various banks around the world. And one of those banks, through a series of corporate structures and holding companies that most people don't understand and don't care to understand, was connected to Summit Trust Bank. That's right, Summit Trust, the bank where Clarissa worked, where she was so proud to be a branch manager, was part of a larger financial network that ultimately handled some of my fund's transactions. Which meant, technically, legally, and hilariously, my ex-wife who called me a beggar and said I'd never amount to anything was essentially working for me. She just had no idea. I laughed when I first discovered this connection. Laughed so hard I spilled coffee all over my desk and had to scramble to save my keyboard. The irony was so perfect, so cosmically absurd, that I couldn't have planned it better if I'd tried. And I didn't try. That's the best part. The universe just handed this to me, gift-wrapped with a bow made of poetic justice. So there I sat, looking at my dashboard, watching $4.2 billion worth of assets being managed by algorithms I'd written, and I realized something. Tomorrow was going to be a very good day. Now, you'd think after getting publicly humiliated by my ex-wife in front of a bank full of witnesses, I want to storm back in there with a megaphone and a PowerPoint presentation about how rich I actually am. Maybe hire a skywriter to spell out my net worth over the building. Really lean into the dramatic reveal like some kind of financial superhero origin story. But that's not how real power works. Real power whispers. Real power doesn't need validation from people who wouldn't understand it anyway. And most importantly, real power knows that the best revenge isn't served hot or cold. It's served in a conference room with a legal team and a meeting agenda that slowly, methodically destroys someone's entire worldview. I wanted this to feel like a calendar invite that ruins lives. You know the kind. Those meeting requests that pop up in your email with an innocuous subject line like quick sync or touch base, but you know, deep in your soul, that someone's about to get fired or a project's about to get canceled or your entire department is being restructured. I wanted Clarissa to walk into a room thinking it was just another boring Thursday meeting, maybe grab a coffee first, check her phone, fix her lipstick, and then have the floor drop out from under her designer heels in the most professional way possible. So I did what any reasonable secret billionaire would do. I called my lawyer. Well, not just my lawyer. Derek Lang was technically my legal counsel, but really he was part lawyer, part strategic advisor, part therapist, and full-time sarcasm expert. The man could find the humor in a tax audit and make contract negotiations feel like comedy shows. I'd hired him about a year into building Helix when things started getting serious and I needed someone who understood both international finance law and how to keep a secret better than a Cold War spy. He was worth every penny of his absolutely obscene hourly rate, and considering I was paying him with money that literally generated itself while I slept, I wasn't exactly counting pennies. I picked up my phone and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, because Derek Lang doesn't let calls go to voicemail unless he's actively in court or deliberately avoiding someone. And since I paid him enough to buy a yacht every quarter, he definitely wasn't avoiding me. "Morning, boss," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Derek was one of maybe 3 people on the planet who knew my real identity, who understood that Julian Hart, the divorced nobody, and Jay Hale, the mysterious billionaire, were the same person. He thought it was the funniest thing in the world, this double life I was living. Called it my Clark Kent routine, except instead of a phone booth, I just changed from sweatpants to a suit. "Morning, Derek. I need you to set something up for me. This should be good. What happened? Did someone insult your Honda again?" He was referencing the time a valet guy at a fancy restaurant had laughed at my car, and I'd ended up buying the restaurant just to fire him. Okay, I didn't actually do that, but Derek liked to joke that I should have. Better. My ex-wife called me a beggar yesterday. In public. At her bank. There was a pause, and then Derek started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but a full-on, gasping for air laugh that went on for a solid 15 seconds. "Please tell me it was Summit Trust. Please tell me she works at one of our banks. Branch manager, downtown location. Oh, this is Christmas. This is better than Christmas. This is like Christmas and my birthday and the Super Bowl all happening at once. What do you want to do?" I took a sip of my coffee, letting the moment breathe. Set up a meeting with Summit Trust's regional director. Tomorrow if possible. Call it a risk reassessment. Make it sound urgent, but not alarming. You know, that special tone that makes middle managers sweat through their shirts. Done. Who's attending from our side? Representative from Helix Capital. Specifically Jay Hale. Another pause. So, basically you. In a suit. Looking like you have money instead of looking like you're about to fix someone's printer. Exactly. Think you can make it happen? Boss, I can make anything happen. That's why you pay me the big bucks. Is the branch manager going to be in this meeting? That's up to their regional director. But I'm guessing when he hears that Helix Capital wants to discuss their relationship with Summit Trust, he's going to want all hands on deck, including his star branch manager. Derek was quiet for a moment, and I could practically hear the gears turning in his head, the beautiful legal machinery calculating all the ways this could go. "You're not actually going to pull your funds, are you? That seems excessive." "Derek," she called me a beggar. In front of customers. While I was trying to help my elderly neighbor pay her heating bill. "Okay, yeah, pull the funds. Pull all of them. Burn it down. I'll draft the paperwork. I haven't decided yet what I'm actually going to do. But I want the option. I want to walk into that room with the power to completely destroy her career, and then I'll decide in the moment whether or not I actually pull the trigger. You're a better man than me. I'd have already started transferring assets. That's why you're the lawyer and I'm the client. You get to be ruthless. I get to pretend I'm conflicted about it." He laughed again. "I'll send you the meeting details within the hour. What should I tell them the meeting's about specifically?" "Portfolio review and risk assessment regarding Summit Trust's operational standards and client service protocols. Make it sound technical and boring, but with just enough edge that they know something's wrong. Beautiful. Vague enough to be terrifying, specific enough to sound legitimate. You want me there?" "Absolutely. I need someone to handle the actual legal jargon while I sit there looking mysterious and wealthy. That's what I do best." "Oh, and Julian." "Yeah. You're going to need a better suit than the one you wore to my birthday dinner. That thing looked like you borrowed it from a youth pastor. It's a perfectly good suit. It's a perfectly good suit for someone who makes $50,000 a year and has a Costco membership. You're about to walk into a meeting representing a $4.2 billion fund. Dress like it. I'm texting you the address of my tailor. Tell him I sent you. He'll take care of you. Derek, I don't need. Boss, I love you. But I'm not sitting in a meeting with a secret billionaire who looks like he's about to sell me a used Camry. Get the suit. Expense it. Hell, buy 5 suits. You can afford it. He had a point. I'd been so focused on staying under the radar, on maintaining my cover as regular Julian, the divorced nobody, that I'd forgotten that J. Hale wouldn't shop at Men's Warehouse. J. Hale would have suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. J. Hale would look like money without trying, would walk into a room and make everyone else feel underdressed just by existing. Fine, I'll get the suit. Thank you. Now, let me work my magic. By this time tomorrow, your ex-wife is going to have the worst day of her professional life, and I'm going to have the best story to tell at parties for the next decade. Just keep my real identity quiet. Always do, boss. Always do. He hung up, and I sat there staring at my phone, feeling that anticipation build even higher. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. Though let's be honest, revenge was definitely a factor. This was about showing Clarissa, showing her family, showing everyone who'd ever underestimated me or dismissed me or treated me like I was less than, that they'd been catastrophically wrong. That the quiet guy in the corner, the one who didn't brag or show off or perform his success for social media, was operating on a level they couldn't even comprehend. I finished my coffee, opened my laptop, and sent Mrs. Keller $250 through a different bank, a smaller, friendlier one where nobody knew who I was and nobody cared. Then I opened my calendar and stared at tomorrow's date, imagining Clarissa's face when she realized what was about to happen. Derek was right. This was better than Christmas. This was justice with a really expensive suit and a legal team that could make grown men cry. And I was going to savor every single second of it. But first, I needed to go shopping. Because apparently, even revenge requires proper attire. The next day, I woke up feeling like a character in a movie montage. You know, the kind where the underdog protagonist is about to walk into the final confrontation and the music swells and everything goes into slow motion. Except there was no music, just my alarm clock screaming at me at 6 a.m. And the only thing in slow motion was me trying to figure out how to tie a Windsor knot, because apparently, that's what rich people do with their ties, and I'd been using the same lazy knot for the past 20 years. Derek's tailor had hooked me up, and I'm not going to lie. The suit was incredible. It was this navy blue number that probably cost more than my first car, fit me like it had been painted on by Italian masters, and made me look like I knew what a stock portfolio was without needing to Google it first. The fabric felt like butter, if butter could be woven into clothing, and when I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the guy staring back. This wasn't Julian Hart, the divorced guy who fixed Wi-Fi routers and wore Costco jeans. This was Jay, Hale, mysterious billionaire, and honestly, the guy looked pretty damn good. I paired it with a plain tie, nothing flashy, no patterns that screamed, I'm trying too hard, and shoes that Derek had insisted I buy, which cost more than some people's rent and felt like walking on actual clouds. Real wealth whispers, remember? It doesn't show up in a gold Lumbo blasting rap music. It shows up in a perfectly tailored suit, driving a practical car, looking completely unremarkable except for that indefinable quality that makes people instinctively straighten their posture when you walk into a room. I met Derek outside Summit Trust at 9:45 a.m. He was already there, leaning against his Tesla, because of course Derek drove a Tesla. The man was a walking cliché of successful lawyer stereotypes. And when he saw me, he actually did a double take. Holy shit, he said, which is not typical lawyer vocabulary, but Derek had never been typical. You look like you actually have money. I'm impressed. I didn't think you had it in you. It's just a suit, Derek. No, my friend, that's not just a suit. That's a statement. That's a declaration of war wrapped in Italian wool. Clarissa's going to have a stroke. That's not the goal. Maybe not your goal, but it's definitely going to be a side effect. Come on, let's go ruin some lives. He said this with such enthusiasm that you'd think we were going to Disneyland instead of a bank meeting. But that was Derek. He found joy in the strangest places. usually places where other people found misery and despair. We walked through those same glass doors I'd walked through yesterday. Except this time, everything felt different. Yesterday, I was Julian the nobody, getting $250 from my neighbor. Today I was Jay, Hale, and the energy shift was palpable. The security guard who'd barely glanced at me yesterday actually straightened up and nodded respectfully. The receptionist, who'd been filing her nails and ignoring customers like it was her job description, suddenly became the most attentive person in the building. "Good morning, gentlemen. How can I help you?" she asked, with a smile that was 100% professional and 0% genuine, but at least she was trying. "We have a 10 a.m. meeting with Regional Director Patel," Derek said, handing her a business card that probably cost more to print than my first paycheck. "Representatives from Helix Capital Systems." The change in her demeanor was instant. Her eyes went wide. Her smile went from customer service to actual fear, and she picked up the phone so fast I'm surprised she didn't sprain something. "Mr. Patel, your 10 a.m. is here." "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." She hung up and gestured toward the elevator with a hand that was slightly shaking. "Top floor, executive suite. Mr. Patel will meet you there personally." We rode the elevator in silence, Derek checking his phone and occasionally smirking at whatever he was reading, me trying to keep my heart rate under control, because despite the suit and the confidence and the $4.2 billion sitting in various accounts around the world, I was still human, and this was still terrifying. Not the meeting itself. I'd been in plenty of high-stakes meetings over the past few years, even if they'd been virtual and nobody could see that I was wearing sweatpants below the camera line. But this was personal. This was Clarissa's territory, her domain, the place where she felt powerful and important, and I was about to destroy it. The elevator doors opened, and there he was, Mr. Rajesh Patel, Regional Director, practically vibrating with anxiety. He was a short man in his 50s, wearing a suit that was nice, but not as nice as mine. I noticed that immediately and filed it away as a small victory. And he had that particular expression that middle management gets when they know something's wrong but don't know what yet. Fear mixed with forced professionalism, like a dog that knows it's going to the vet but is trying to act excited about the car ride. "Mr. Hale, such an honor, such an honor." He rushed forward with his hand extended, shaking mine so enthusiastically I thought his arm might fall off. "We're thrilled to have Helix Capital as a partner." "Absolutely thrilled. Please, come this way. We have the conference room prepared." We followed him down a hallway lined with motivational posters about teamwork and success and other corporate nonsense that meant nothing, past offices where employees were pretending to work while obviously trying to see who we were, and into a conference room that was trying way too hard to look impressive. Big table, leather chairs, a view of the parking garage, real luxury stuff. And there, sitting at the table with a tablet in front of her, and that same confident smile from yesterday, was Clarissa. She looked up when we walked in, and I watched in real time as her brain tried to process what her eyes were seeing. First there was confusion. Who are these suit-wearing men? Then recognition. Wait, is that Julian? Then complete and utter bewilderment. Why is Julian here in a suit that costs more than my monthly salary? "Julian," she said, and her voice cracked slightly on the second syllable. "What are you? Why are you?" Mr. Patel looked between us, confused. "You two know each other?" "We used to," I said calmly, pulling out a chair and sitting down like I owned the place. Which, technically, in a weird corporate structure kind of way, I kind of did. Mrs. Montgomery and I were married once. Ancient history. Clarissa's face went through about 15 different colors, landing somewhere between pale and about to vomit. "I don't understand. What's going on? Mr. Patel, why is my ex-husband in this meeting?" Derek, bless him, jumped in with the smooth professionalism of a man who'd done this dance 1,000 times. "Mrs. Montgomery, allow me to introduce Mr. J. Hale, founder and CEO of Helix Capital Systems. Mr. Hale, this is Clarissa Montgomery, branch manager." The silence that followed was so thick you could have cut it with a knife, packaged it, and sold it as premium awkwardness. Clarissa's mouth opened and closed like a fish that had just been pulled out of water and was trying to figure out where all the oxygen went. "Mr. Patel looked confused, probably trying to do the math on how his branch manager's ex-husband was apparently a billionaire CEO. I let the moment breathe, let it stretch out until it was almost uncomfortable, and then I leaned forward slightly, folded my hands on the table, and looked at Mr. Patel directly. Thank you for taking this meeting on such short notice. I'll get straight to the point. Helix Capital is withdrawing all its assets from your institution. Effective immediately. Mr. Patel's face went from confused to horrified so fast, I'm pretty sure he broke some kind of record. All of them. Surely you mean. All $4.2 billion, I confirmed, keeping my voice level and professional, like I was ordering coffee instead of essentially pulling the financial equivalent of ripping out someone's spine. Every account, every fund, every asset currently held or managed through Summit Trust or its parent companies. We'll be transferring them to other institutions by end of business today. Clarissa made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. 4.2 billion? She was staring at me like I'd just grown a second head, or maybe like I'd announced I was actually an alien who'd been wearing a Julian Hart costume this whole time. That's not possible. You can't. I turned to look at her, really look at her, and smiled the kind of smile you give someone when you're about to deliver the punchline to a joke they didn't know they were part of. Didn't look like someone with money yesterday, did I? Didn't look like someone worth respect? You were right, Clarissa. Your bank doesn't serve beggars. I paused, letting that sink in. But apparently, it works for them. The color drained from her face completely. Mr. Patel looked like he was about to pass out, hyperventilate, or possibly both simultaneously. Derek was trying very hard not to laugh and failing miserably. I could see his shoulders shaking. Clarissa's face collapsed faster than a house of cards in a wind tunnel, faster than the stock market in 2008, faster than my faith in our marriage when I caught her texting Tanner at 3 a.m. with heart emojis. It was the kind of facial expression that transcends normal human emotion and enters the territory of existential crisis, where your entire understanding of reality just shatters and you're left trying to pick up pieces that don't fit together anymore. Her perfectly applied makeup suddenly looked like war paint on a losing soldier, and those designer heels she loved so much might as well have been cement blocks dragging her down into an abyss of her own making. Julian, wait. Her voice cracked, and I mean really cracked, like a teenage boy going through puberty kind of crack. She stood up so fast her chair rolled backward and hit the wall with a thud that made everyone jump. You can't do this. You can't just. This will ruin me. The branch, my position, everything I've worked for. You'll destroy it all. I looked at her calmly, like she was a stranger asking me for directions instead of my ex-wife, who was currently experiencing what I can only describe as a professional apocalypse. I'm not destroying anything, Clarissa. I'm simply moving my assets to an institution that values all its clients equally, regardless of how they dress or how much they're withdrawing on any given day. It's just business. Just business. She was practically shrieking now, and Mr. Patel looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and die. Just business? You're doing this because of yesterday. Because of what I said. What did you say yesterday? Mr. Patel asked, his voice barely above a whisper, like he already knew the answer was going to be bad, but needed to hear it anyway. The way you need to check your bank account, even though you know you're broke. Clarissa opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. She looked like a fish, which was ironic because she was definitely drowning right now, just not in water. It was a misunderstanding. Julian came in to withdraw a small amount, and I made a joke. That's all. Just a joke. She called me a beggar, I said flatly, looking at Mr. Patel. In front of your entire lobby. Said you don't serve beggars here. I was trying to help my 74-year-old neighbor pay her heating bill so she wouldn't freeze to death, and your branch manager decided that was an appropriate time to publicly humiliate me based on my appearance. The sound Mr. Patel made was somewhere between a gasp and a groan, like someone had just kicked him in the stomach and then told him his house was on fire. He turned to Clarissa with an expression that could have melted steel. You said what? I didn't know. Clarissa was crying now, actual tears running down her face, ruining that expensive makeup she probably spent an hour applying this morning. How was I supposed to know? He looked like he was wearing sweatpants. He drives a Honda. He lives in a regular apartment. There was no indication that I interrupted, my voice still calm, still measured, still utterly in control while she spiraled into chaos. That I had money? That I deserved basic human respect? That I was worth treating with dignity? Which one of those things requires a certain net worth, Clarissa? She had no answer to that. Nobody did. The silence in that conference room was so absolute, so complete, that I could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead, could hear Mr. Patel's labored breathing, could hear Derek trying unsuccessfully to suppress what was definitely a snicker. Mr. Patel stood up slowly, like a man walking to his own execution, and turned to face Clarissa with the kind of expression that ends careers. "Mrs. Montgomery, you insulted a client. Not just any client. Apparently one of the largest clients our institution has ever had the privilege of serving. You discriminated against him based on his appearance, his choice of vehicle, and the amount he was withdrawing. You violated approximately 15 company policies that I can name off the top of my head, and probably another 20 that our legal department will gleefully point out in the next hour. Mr. Patel, please. Effective immediately, you're terminated." He said it with the finality of a judge delivering a sentence, and honestly, that's exactly what it was. Security will escort you from the building. You have 15 minutes to collect your personal belongings. Your access credentials will be deactivated, and you will receive a formal termination letter by end of business today detailing the reasons for your dismissal. Clarissa's legs seemed to give out, and she collapsed back into her chair like a puppet with cut strings. "You can't. This is unfair. I've been a model employee for 6 years. I've exceeded every target, brought in millions in new accounts. My performance reviews have been outstanding. And you threw all of that away," Mr. Patel said coldly, "the moment you decided that someone's worth as a human being was determined by their bank balance. In one interaction, you managed to cost this institution potentially billions of dollars and expose us to a discrimination lawsuit that our legal team is probably already having nightmares about." Right on cue, 2 security guards appeared at the door. They must have been called before we even got to the building. Mr. Patel was clearly a man who prepared for contingencies. They stood there awkwardly, trying to look professional while obviously being deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. Because let's be real, nobody enjoys escorting a crying woman out of her workplace, even if she absolutely deserves it. Clarissa looked at me one last time, mascara running down her face, her confident boss babe persona completely shattered and scattered across the conference room floor like broken glass. "Julian, please. We were married. That has to count for something. You can't let them do this to me." And here's where I could have been magnanimous. I could have been the bigger person, could have said something about how I didn't want her fired, just wanted an apology, could have played the role of the gracious winner who shows mercy to the defeated opponent. But you know what? I looked at her sitting. By the time I got home, changed out of my billionaire costume and back into my natural habitat of sweatpants and a hoodie that had seen better days, probably in 2019, my phone was vibrating like it had developed a severe neurological condition. I'm talking constant buzzing, the kind that makes you think maybe you accidentally signed up for some kind of spam text service, except instead of offers for cheap car insurance, I was getting front row seats to the Montgomery family's complete and total meltdown. The first text came from Tiffany, Clarissa's sister, and the only member of that family who had functioning human emotions. "OMG, is it true you froze her bank?" 3 exclamation points and all caps. She was shook. I could picture her sitting somewhere, probably at her marketing job that she was definitely not doing at the moment, staring at her phone with her mouth hanging open like she'd just witnessed a UFO landing in her backyard. I texted back, didn't freeze anything, just moved my assets to a more respectful institution. Professional, calm, the kind of response that makes you sound reasonable even when you've just nuked someone's career from orbit. She replied within seconds, "Clarissa's having a complete breakdown. Mom's freaking out. Dad locked himself in his study. This is insane. Also, kind of iconic. Is that wrong to say?" I actually laughed at that. At least Tiffany had perspective. Not wrong. Accurate. Then came the call from Diana, Clarissa's mother, the woman who'd spent 6 years treating me like a disappointing houseplant that wouldn't die no matter how much she neglected it. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to hear what she'd say now that her daughter's life had imploded and I'd turned out to be exactly the opposite of what they'd all assumed. "Julian." Her voice was ice cold, the kind of cold that makes Antarctica look like a tropical vacation. "How could you humiliate her like this? In public? Getting her fired from her job? This is cruel, even for you, even for me. Like I had a history of cruelty, like I was known for going around destroying people's careers for fun. The audacity was actually impressive. Diana, I said, keeping my voice level because the high road is easier to navigate when you're sitting on a pile of money. I didn't get her fired. She got herself fired by calling a client a beggar. In public. I just happened to be that client, and I happened to be able to do something about it. You could have been the bigger person. You could have forgiven her. Instead, you went nuclear and destroyed her career out of spite. Publicly, I added helpfully. I destroyed her career publicly. You know, the same way she publicly humiliated me yesterday. The same way she publicly talked about how I was holding her back during our entire marriage. The same way she publicly celebrated leaving me like it was winning the lottery. But please, tell me more about being the bigger person. I'm all ears. She sputtered for a moment, trying to find words that would make me the villain in this story, but we both knew the narrative didn't work. Think of the family name. Think of what this means for us. I did think of the family name, I replied. That's why I didn't use it. I'm not a Montgomery anymore, remember? You all made that very clear during the divorce. I'm just Julian Hart, the nobody with the Honda and the computer thing, who apparently has enough money to make regional directors sweat through their Italian suits. This isn't over, Julian. We can fix this. Think of everything we meant to each other. Diana, we didn't mean anything to each other. You tolerated me because I was married to your daughter, and you barely managed that. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some really important nothing to do, which apparently is all I'm good for. I hung up before she could respond. It felt good, really good, like scratching an itch that had been bothering me for 6 years. Next came Richard, Clarissa's father, the man who'd looked through me like I was made of particularly uninteresting glass for the entire duration of my marriage to his daughter. His voice on the phone was different though, not angry like Diana's, but careful, calculated, like a businessman trying to negotiate a deal he knows he's already lost. Son, he started, which was rich considering he'd never called me that when I was actually his son-in-law. We can fix this. Think of the family name. Think of what this means for Clarissa's future. She's young. She made a mistake. She's 38, Richard. That's not young. That's old enough to know better. And it wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate cruelty based on her assumption that I was beneath her. Julian, be reasonable. One comment shouldn't destroy a woman's entire career. You're right, I interrupted. It shouldn't. But actions have consequences, Richard. You taught me that, remember? At that Thanksgiving dinner, when you spent 45 minutes explaining how people who don't take risks never succeed, how the world rewards those who are willing to be ruthless in business. Well, congratulations. Your daughter was ruthless. I'm just better at it. There was a long pause. What do you want? Money? An apology? Name your price. And there it was. The assumption that everything could be solved with money or negotiations, that every problem was just a transaction waiting to happen. I don't want anything from you, Richard. I wanted respect, maybe 6 years ago when I was part of your family. But I'm past that now. Way past it. Son, we can fix this. Think of. Don't worry, sir, I said, echoing the same formal tone I'd used when addressing him during family dinners when he'd barely acknowledged my existence. I did think of the family name. That's why I didn't use it. Wouldn't want to tarnish the Montgomery reputation by associating with a beggar. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then he hung up. Didn't say goodbye, didn't try to negotiate further, just hung up like a CEO ending a conference call that wasn't going his way. My phone kept buzzing. Text messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, mutual friends from the marriage, colleagues who'd connected with me on LinkedIn and then never interacted with my posts, random acquaintances who apparently had opinions about my life choices. Everyone had something to say, and it ranged from supportive, good for you, man. She had it coming, to judgmental, this seems excessive, don't you think? To just plain nosy, wait, you're a billionaire? How did that happen? I ignored most of them, turned my phone on Do Not Disturb, and made myself that cup of coffee I'd been promising myself all day. The good stuff, the beans I'd ordered online from a small roaster in Portland, who probably had no idea one of their customers could buy their entire company with pocket change. I ground them fresh, used my pour-over setup that Clarissa had always made fun of, just use a Keurig like a normal person, Julian, and watched the water slowly extract every bit of flavor from those beans while my phone continued its seizure on the counter. One text did catch my eye though, mainly because it came from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Hart, this is Amanda Rees from the New York Financial Times. I'm working on a story about Helix Capital and its mysterious founder, Jay Hale. Would you be available for comment? Oh, so it was starting. The media had caught wind of something interesting, and they were digging. This was inevitable, really. You can't threaten to pull $2 billion from a major financial institution without someone in that building talking to someone who knows someone who works at a newspaper. The banking world is gossipy as hell, despite all the NDAs and professional conduct policies. I deleted the message. Then I blocked the number. Then I made a mental note to call Derek later about implementing better privacy protocols, because apparently my quiet billionaire life was about to become significantly less quiet. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from Clarissa herself, sent from what was probably her personal account since her work email was definitely deactivated by now. The subject line read, "Please read this." I almost deleted it without opening it. Almost. But curiosity. That same curiosity that had gotten me into this mess by walking into her bank yesterday, made me click. Julian. It started, and I could practically hear her voice, shaky and desperate. I know you probably hate me right now, and I understand why. What I said yesterday was wrong. It was cruel and unprofessional, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But please, I'm begging you, don't do this. I've lost my job, my reputation is destroyed, and now my family is falling apart because of this. Tanner left me, said he couldn't be with someone who was this much of a liability. Everything I worked for is gone. Isn't that enough? Haven't I paid enough for one stupid comment? I read it twice, waiting to feel something. Sympathy maybe, or regret, or even satisfaction. But all I felt was tired. Tired of the drama, tired of being the villain in someone else's story, tired of having to justify standing up for myself. I closed the email without responding. She'd asked if she'd paid enough for one stupid comment, and honestly, that wasn't my problem to solve anymore. She'd made her choices, said her words, built her reputation on looking down at people she deemed beneath her. The consequences of that weren't my responsibility. I took my coffee to the window and looked out at the city, at all the people going about their lives completely unaware that somewhere in this urban sprawl, a minor drama was playing out that would make absolutely zero difference to any of them. They had their own problems, their own victories, their own stories. And me? I had my coffee, my sweatpants, and the satisfying knowledge that sometimes, just sometimes, the universe lets you be petty and righteous at the same time. My phone buzzed one more time. Another text from Tiffany. For what it's worth, I think you're handling this better than any of us would. Also, can you teach me about investing? Clearly, you know something we don't. I smiled and texted back. Step 1. Don't judge people by their Honda. Noted, she replied. Step 2. Make really good coffee and be patient. Everything else is just details. A week passed. 7 days of radio silence from the Montgomery family. 7 days of me living my regular life. Coding, managing my portfolio, visiting Mrs. Keller who insisted on baking me 3 different pies as repayment for the $250 even though I told her approximately 40 times that it wasn't necessary. 7 days of the story slowly fading from the immediate crisis zone into the remember when that happened category. The media had sniffed around for a day or two, but without confirmation of Jay Hale's real identity and without anyone willing to go on record about what actually happened, the story died like most financial gossip does, quietly and without resolution. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon while I was debugging some code that was being particularly stubborn, my phone rang. Clarissa. I stared at the screen for a moment, debating whether to answer or let it go to voicemail, where it could live with all the other attempts at communication I'd been ignoring. But something made me pick up. Maybe curiosity, maybe boredom, maybe just the sense that this story needed an actual ending instead of just trailing off into nothing. Julian. Her voice was different. Smaller. None of that confident boss babe energy. None of that superior tone that used to make me feel about 2 inches tall. She sounded defeated, and honestly, I didn't love that I could hear it so clearly. Please, can we talk? Just once. Face to face. We need closure. My family needs closure. I should have said no. Should have told her that we'd had our closure in that conference room when security escorted her out. Should have explained that closure isn't something you get to demand from people you've wronged. But you know what? I was curious. Curious about what she wanted to say. Curious about whether she'd actually learned anything. curious about whether her family had finally realized that the nobody they'd ignored for 6 years had been somebody all along. Fine, I said, but on my terms. I'll host dinner. Friday night, 7 p.m. You, your parents, and Tiffany if she wants to come. I'll text you the address. There was a pause. Dinner? At your place? Problem with that? No, I didn't think you'd want us in your home. Clarissa, if I wanted to keep being petty, I'd make you meet me at a McDonald's. This is me being civilized. Take it or leave it. We'll be there. Thank you, Julian. Really. I hung up and immediately called Derek, because obviously I needed a witness/moral support/someone to stop me if I decided to do something stupid like forgive her. You invited them to dinner? Derek's voice was incredulous, like I'd just told him I was planning to swim with sharks while wearing a suit made of tuna. Boss, that's either the most magnanimous thing you've ever done or the most sadistic. I can't tell which. Little bit of both, probably. Can you make it? Wouldn't miss it for the world. Should I bring popcorn? This feels like a popcorn event. Bring wine. Expensive wine. The kind that costs more than Richard's golf club membership. Now we're talking. Friday came faster than I expected, probably because I spent most of the week preparing for this dinner like it was a military operation. See, I'd moved since the divorce, hadn't told anyone, hadn't updated my address with people who didn't need to know, just quietly relocated to a penthouse that had views of the city skyline that made real estate agents weep with joy. It was the kind of place that screamed, I have money, without having to say a word. All floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture, and that particular kind of expensive simplicity that only rich people can pull off because everyone else just looks broke. I hired a private chef for the evening, a guy named Marcus who'd worked at 3 Michelin-star restaurants and could make food that tasted like art felt, if that makes sense. I told him to make something impressive but not pretentious, delicious but intimidating, the kind of meal that makes you realize you're out of your league. He grinned and said, I got you, boss. This is going to be fun. At 6:45 p.m., I was standing in my living room in dark slacks and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my old monthly rent, looking out at the city lights and wondering if I was making a huge mistake. Derek was already there, sitting on my couch with a glass of wine, looking absolutely delighted with the entire situation. You know this is insane, right? He said, swirling his wine like he was in a movie. Inviting your ex-wife and her family to your secret billionaire penthouse for dinner? This is some soap opera level drama. Yeah, well, I've always been dramatic. Just took everyone a while to notice. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 p.m., because of course the Montgomerys were punctual when it came to judging people's homes. I opened the door, and the look on their faces was worth every penny I'd spent on this place. Diana's mouth literally fell open. Richard froze mid-step, like someone had pressed pause on his entire existence. Clarissa's eyes went wide, then wider, then so wide I thought they might fall out of her head. Even Tiffany, who'd been relatively cool about this whole thing, let out a low whistle. Holy shit, Tiffany said, then immediately covered her mouth. Sorry, but seriously, holy shit. Come in, I said, stepping aside and gesturing to the interior that probably looked like something out of Architectural Digest because, fun fact, it had been featured in Architectural Digest last year under an anonymous owner profile. Make yourselves comfortable. They filed in slowly, like tourists in a museum, taking in the view, the furniture, the art on the walls that I'd bought mostly because Derek said it was a good investment and it looked nice. Richard walked straight to the windows, staring out at the skyline with an expression I couldn't quite read. Nice place, he muttered finally, which from Richard was basically a standing ovation. Must be expensive. It's paid for in cash, I replied, channeling every ounce of petty energy I had. Unlike your yacht, which I believe is still on a payment plan. His face went red. Tiffany snorted into her hand. Diana looked like she wanted to say something, but couldn't figure out what wouldn't sound completely hypocritical given the circumstances. We moved to the dining room, which Marcus had set up like we were hosting a state dinner. Clarissa sat down carefully, like the chair might disappear if she wasn't gentle with it, and I caught her looking around with this expression that was part amazement, part devastation, like she was calculating everything she'd given up when she left me. Dinner started civilized enough. Marcus had outdone himself with the first course, some kind of scallop situation that melted in your mouth and probably cost more per bite than a fast food value meal. Everyone ate in silence for a minute, which was awkward as hell, but also kind of perfect because I wanted them to sit with their assumptions, marinate in the reality that they'd been catastrophically wrong about me. Finally, Diana broke the silence. Julian, I think we owe you an apology. You think? I set down my fork and looked at her directly. That's interesting phrasing. Very noncommittal. I think is what you say when you're not sure if you left the oven on, not when you've spent 6 years treating someone like they're beneath you. That's not fair, she protested weakly. Fair? Diana, you introduced me to your friends as Clarissa's husband who has kind eyes, which is code for we can't think of anything impressive about him, so we're focusing on the fact that he's not actively threatening. You whispered about me like I was a charity case. You celebrated when Clarissa left me like she'd escaped from prison. Richard cleared his throat. We may have misjudged you. May have. Richard, you looked through me for 6 years like I was invisible. The only time you ever engaged with me directly was when you needed tech support, and even then, you acted like it was beneath you to ask. You gave me career advice, unsolicited, I might add, about how I should be more ambitious, more driven, more like the men you respected. Well, surprise. I was ambitious. I was driven. I just didn't need to perform it for your approval. Clarissa finally spoke up, her voice small. Julian, I'm sorry. For everything. For how I treated you. For what I said at the bank. For, her voice cracked. For not seeing who you really were. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Genuine remorse. Not the performative kind. Not the, I'm sorry you're upset kind. But actual understanding that she'd messed up in a way that couldn't be fixed with an apology or a conversation or even a lifetime of regret. Clarissa, I said quietly, you saw exactly who I was. You just decided it wasn't enough. And that's fine. People are allowed to want more, to want different. But you didn't just leave. You spent 3 years making sure everyone knew that leaving me was an upgrade, that I was the problem, that I was holding you back from your potential. You turned our divorce into a publicity campaign for your success story. I know, she whispered. I know, and I'm sorry. Here's the thing, though. I continued, picking up my wine glass. The expensive wine Derek had brought that probably cost more than the dress Diana was wearing. I don't need your apology. I don't need your family's sudden respect. I don't need validation from people who only value me now that they know my net worth. I didn't need those things once, back when I thought your opinion mattered. But I'm past that now. I stood up, walked to my laptop sitting on the side table, and opened it. Pulled up some files I'd prepared specifically for this moment. Before we continue with dinner, I think you all should see something. I connected the laptop to the TV on the wall, and suddenly the screen was filled with documents, records, spreadsheets. Clarissa's employment history at Summit Trust, her expense reports, her authorization logs, and there, highlighted in yellow, were some very interesting transactions. Falsified staff bonuses, I said, pointing to the first set of documents. You reported giving bonuses to employees who never received them and pocketed the difference. Unauthorized expense claims. Fancy dinners with Tanner charged to the corporate account under client entertainment, except there were no clients. And my personal favorite, a personal loan to your boyfriend Tanner from corporate funds, unauthorized and undocumented, which technically counts as embezzlement. Richard's face went from red to white so fast I thought he might pass out. Diana put her hand to her mouth. Clarissa looked like she might throw up her scallops. Months later, Summit Trust quietly replaced its logo, trying to distance itself from the scandal. Clarissa disappeared from social media entirely, deleted her LinkedIn, her Instagram, all those carefully curated posts about success and ambition. Last I heard, she was working as a teller at a rural branch somewhere upstate, which felt like poetic justice served cold with a side of irony. Meanwhile, I kept living my life. Coding in sweatpants, managing billions, visiting Mrs. Keller every Tuesday for pie and conversation. She still insisted on paying me back that $250, and I still refused. Some debts aren't meant to be repaid. They're meant to remind us why kindness matters. One afternoon, while watering the small garden I'd started on my penthouse balcony, I realized something funny. The $4.2 billion wasn't my biggest withdrawal from that relationship. The real withdrawal was emotional. I'd finally pulled back my time, my energy, my peace from someone who never valued them. And the interest on that withdrawal? Pure, uncomplicated freedom. So yes, Clarissa, you were right about one thing. Your bank doesn't serve beggars. But I don't bank with clowns either.